Israel is planning to drive out Gaza's surviving population as it always said it would do, using the cover of media silence. Meanwhile, despite a supposed ceasefire, Israel is burning children alive in tents. It is killing little kids as they collect firewood and refusing to let in aid. Mass graves of civilians who Israel slaughtered as they desperately tried to get food for their families are being uncovered. Here are just some of the horrors in Gaza right now, which underline why we need to keep talking about Gaza, because Israel's genocide never ended. Let's start with Israel's repeatedly stated plan to empty Gaza of its Palestinian population. Here's a typical example of Western media coverage. Sky News published an article headlined, "Rafah crossing to open in coming days to let Gazans cross into Egypt," Israel says. Here's a classic example of Western media outlets regurgitating Israeli propaganda without informing people of the actual truth, or indeed Israel's repeatedly stated intent. Most would read such a headline and interpret it as some sort of humanitarian gesture of some description. So let's just read this in the Times of Israel. An Israeli official who spoke anonymously to the Associated Press to discuss operational plans said that all Palestinians who want to exit Gaza will be able to exit through Rafah as long as Egypt agrees to receive them. But the crossing won't be open for people wishing to return to Gaza. The official said the EU still had to make some adjustments to logistics before the crossing could open. There were no details on when Palestinians who leave Gaza would be able to return to the Strip via the crossing. There are no such details because, you see, Israel has no intention of letting Palestinians return to Gaza. The plan is to empty Gaza of its surviving population and dress this up as voluntary or indeed a humanitarian gesture. What has actually happened, of course, is that Israel has wiped Gaza from the face of the earth, slaughtered well over 100,000 people. The latest study by the Max Planck Institute in Germany, again, concludes well over 100,000 violent deaths alone. That's excluding indirect deaths, people killed because of the collapse of civilization, healthcare, shelter, the spread of illness. We could go on. It has maimed so many others. It has starved its people and indeed continues to do so. It has destroyed Gaza's hospital. It has murdered Gaza's doctors and nurses. It's killed over 1,700 medics. Bear in mind, that was, Gaza's pre-genocide population of about what? 2.2 million. 1,700 medics. Destroyed Gaza's schools, destroyed other basic pillars of civilization, from libraries to mosques, destroyed Gaza's agriculture and food production and livestock. We could go on. In short, Israel has inflicted apocalyptic carnage on Gaza. It has made it deliberately unlivable. Indeed, Israel has deliberately inflicted conditions of life calculated to bring about the physical destruction of the Palestinian people in Gaza. In other words, genocide. Which is why emptying out the population, what remains of the population, as it has repeatedly committed to do so, is simply another means to complete the genocide. Now, as the Egyptian regime has made clear, the ceasefire agreement stipulates that any agreement to open the Rafah crossing will mean that traffic is open in both directions, thus allowing the Palestinian people to return. Elon Levy, the British Israeli propagandist and indeed former spokesperson to Benjamin Netanyahu, a wanted man due to the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant for war crimes and crimes against humanity, posted in response to the Egyptian position, if Israel closes Rafah, war crime. If Israel opens Rafah, war crime. I can think of no final example of the point that for some people, literally nothing Israel could do would be right. Well, listen up, Elon. If Israel wants to do what is right, it would allow the Rafah crossing to be fully open from both sides. It would also end the continued siege on Gaza. It would cease bombing Gaza and killing its people. It would pay for the reconstruction of Gaza, and it would also hand over its leaders to the International Criminal Court. And one day, you will end up in court for what you have done during this genocide. I bet quite a lot on that. Earlier this year, Donald Trump committed to emptying Gaza of its population and turning Gaza into a resort. This isn't a conspiracy theory. They just went out and said it. Israel backs that plan. And Israeli leaders and officials have repeatedly committed to emptying Gaza of its people and indeed settling it with Israeli colonizers. Several Israeli ministers have committed to that, loudly, proudly. We know that Israel set up what has been called the Voluntary Migration Administration, a secret, shadowy department. Again, Orwellian nonsense. What is called voluntary migration is make life impossible and then leave people feeling they have literally no choice but to leave. There's already reports of Palestinians who've been allowed to leave, for example, for medical reasons, being forced to sign forms agreeing never to return to Gaza. If you want an insight into the evil of this world, how about this? You can now bet on Polymarket as to whether there will be a Gaza mass population relocation by the end of the year. You can also bet on Cowshy as to whether there will be famine in Gaza. They already paid out on that one. Being able to bet on and profit from genocide. How far from dystopia are we really? Meanwhile, the so-called ceasefire remains a travesty. Last night and today, Israel attacked al-Mawasi and burned alive several Palestinians in their tents. That included a father and his two beautiful young boys. Little children who've only known on this earth suffering, pain, terror, violence, hunger, then burned alive during a so-called ceasefire while the world remained silent. Just imagine Hamas had just burned alive Israeli children. Would anyone call that a ceasefire? No. Of course not. It would be regarded as a disgrace to call that a ceasefire. It would lead every news bulletin, be splashed on every front page. A chorus of outrage and condemnation from Western leaders would be deafening as they pointed to such horror as evidence of the unique evil of Hamas. But not so here, because these are Palestinian lives, and Palestinian life is deemed to have no meaning. In another example, the IDF released a statement claiming they had identified two suspects who crossed the yellow line, carried out suspicious activities, and approached the troops in southern Gaza, posing an immediate threat. The Israeli Air Force eliminated the suspects to remove the threat. Who exactly were these clearly dangerous-looking suspects who the Israeli military decided they had clear justification to kill? They were 8-year-old Gomer Abu Asi and 11-year-old Fadi Abu Asi. They were just little boys, little kids trying to collect firewood. Here's just one obscene example of how the so-called IDF labels anyone they wish, anyone they want, as a suspect who they can slaughter. Just like that. Israel continues to stop aid getting into Gaza. Again, in violation of the ceasefire, Israel has only allowed 1/5 of the aid trucks that was promised to enter. The British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper says that the situation in Gaza remains dire, with worsening weather conditions compounding the critical issues caused by damaged infrastructure and over 2 years of conflict. She goes on to say that parents have been trying to shelter their children under broken roofs and open skies. In reference to UK-funded tents, she says, these tents will provide a lifeline to thousands of people needing shelter, protecting them from the cold winds and relentless rain, turning rubble into mud. But she goes on to say that the arrival of the tents represents months of ongoing work by the international community to push for greater aid access, and she has been frustrated to see yet another consignment of aid stuck at the border earlier this year. Note how once again she refuses to name the party responsible for blocking UK-funded tents from getting into Gaza. That is, Britain's ally, Israel. She refuses to commit to any actual action to put pressure on Israel, like ending all arms sales. Britain has provided and is providing the crucial components needed for Israel's F-35 jets to bomb Gaza and destroy its homes, thus forcing surviving Palestinians to need tents. Britain continues to do trade worth £6 billion a year with Israel and continues to refuse to impose sweeping sanctions. Finally, a mass grave uncovered in Gaza. Israel massacred around 2,000 Palestinians seeking aid around sites run by the hideously misnamed and now terminated Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. They then bulldozed some of those bodies into unmarked graves, a violation of international law as per the mistreatment of bodies, ensuring that their loved ones cannot find them. Israel's genocide is not over. This heinous crime of historic proportions continues. And we must keep speaking out as the rest of the Western media overwhelmingly continues to suppress the truth. Please like and subscribe, leave your thoughts and your comments, help us take on a Western media which is complicit in genocide and has facilitated genocide, at patreon.com/homejoes84. Do share the video. As I keep saying, I'm finishing a book called The Fall of the West, which is taking up huge amounts of time. When that's finished, we'll be able to do far more on the video channel. But really appreciate all the support you give. We still reach millions of people each month across all the different platforms, and you make that possible. So thank you. I'll speak to you soon.